let's bring in Senator John Kennedy, Senate Judiciary Committee. He's one of the most insightful and entertaining lawmakers out there today. Senator, we just got to get your take on that speech last night. I guess he wanted it red, white, and blue, but it came out pure red, and he came out loaded for bear. A political speech more suited for the DNC. What are your thoughts?
Well, I guess, Brian, I'd make 3 points. Number one, after listening to the president's speech, I really understand why it's an unassailable fact that age does not guarantee wisdom. Number two, we saw the President Biden we saw last night was really every inch Joe Biden, the politician. His speech was a very cynical attempt to fill our heads with stupid. And number three, I thought to myself, what a missed opportunity to talk to the American people straight up about the reasons when they lie down and sleep at night they can't. He could have talked about crime, inflation, learning loss by our children, the mountains of fentanyl coming across the border, killing our teenagers. Instead, he chose to say to the American people, if you don't agree with me about higher taxes, more government, if you don't agree with me that moms are birthing people, if you don't agree with me that government has a constitutional right to talk to your 5-year-old about sexuality, you're a bad person, and you're not even an American. And it was, I guess after it was over, I said to myself, you know, it's really true. I've said this before, but the water's not going to clear up in Washington until we get the pigs out of the creek. And no one is coming to save us but ourselves. I hope people will go vote.
Here's a clip, by the way, Senator, so we can let our viewers see what you're talking about.
They were watching Tucker.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. They do not recognize the will of the people. They refuse to accept the results of a free election. And they're working right now, as I speak, in state after state, to give power to decide elections in America. MAGA forces are determined to take this country backwards to an America where there is no right to choose, no right to privacy, no right to contraception, no right to marry who you love. MAGA Republicans look at America and see carnage and darkness and despair. They spread fear and lies. Lies told for profit and power. But I see a different America, an America with an unlimited future, an America that's about to take off. I hope you see it as well.
Senator, you know a lot of MAGA Republicans. Does he describe them accurately?
Well, that sounds like a long-winded description and definition of what Secretary Clinton called deplorables. The people that President Biden is talking about, some of whom supported President Trump, some didn't, are the people who get up every day, go to work, obey the law, pay their taxes, try to teach their kids morals. They do want to make, they are proud of America. They do want to make America great again. They just don't agree with President Biden's neo-socialist woke agenda. They don't believe in bigger government. They don't believe in higher taxes. They don't believe in more spending. They don't believe in more regulation. They don't believe in more debt. They don't believe that we ought to turn our cops into social workers. They don't believe that stuff. And I think I'm very disappointed that the president would call people who don't agree with him those kind of names. I just think he's made a political mistake, but it says something about his administration.
It does indeed. You know, we got a twofer with you. Not only are you a politician to talk about Joe Biden's nakedly political speech last night, but you were also a teacher. once upon a time. And I'm sure you saw the fact that they looked at that national test score that they give for 9-year-olds, kids who are in 3rd and 4th grade, to figure out how proficient they are in reading and math. And after the pandemic, we discovered, to our horror, our kids are going the wrong way. They've lost 5 points in reading. They've lost 7 points in math. And of course, it is blamed largely on the pandemic. But here's the unusual part right now. We know that the teachers' unions kept the kids out of school classes as long as they could, but this administration is blaming the last administration. Listen to this, Senator.
Right.
So let's step back to where we were not too long ago when this president walked into this administration, how mismanaged the pandemic, the response to the pandemic was. In less than 6 months, our schools went from 46% to open to nearly all of them being open to full time. That was the work of this president, and that was the work of Democrats, in spite of Republicans not voting for the American Rescue Plan. Again, schools were not open. The economy was shut down. Businesses were shut down. Every Republican Congress voted against that money. That is the reality. We had to do this on our own.
And Senator, of course, it was, the coronavirus started during the Trump administration, so the Trump administration pretty much shut everything down. But then, one by one, states started coming back online with their kids. It was the teachers' unions that were talking to the Joe Biden administration, the next administration, about keeping kids out of the classroom as long as possible and all the mandates and stuff like that. Then they wound up with $190 billion from the American Rescue Plan that she was just referring to for the schools, and a lot of that hasn't even been spent yet, and now our kids are going the wrong direction in reading and math.
Well, if you believe what the president's press secretary said, you'll never own your own home. I mean, it's just not true. The American people watched it. Our schools were shut down by woke local school boards at the urging of many teachers' unions, and President Biden never said a word. I mean, in some cases, he encouraged them. He just stood there, sucking on his teeth. So it's a little bit of revisionist history. And he could have talked about that last night. He could have talked about his plan to help our kids regain the knowledge that they lost as a result of their own government shutting down the schools supposedly in the name of science. We probably lost 20 years of progress that we had made in our public schools, and we haven't heard a peep out of this administration. Congress sent $200 billion to the schools for remedial work. You know what we've heard from many of the states, not all, but many of them? Nothing. Zero, nada. The money's still sitting there. The president hasn't said a word.
I got some numbers for you. Only 12% of the money has been spent. In New York City, they took $4.9 million. They put it towards a No Stopping New York campaign. In Montgomery, Alabama, they have also done very little with it. They tried to stop an anti-vaping, and they bought anti-vaping detectors. Also in New York City, they put together the money for $12 million for expanding the controversial restorative justice educational discipline practice to all middle schools.
That's not about
so we got to do that.
coronavirus.
So they gave you guys, not you, but the rescue plan went out to the states and they said, do something responsible. And the states, if they did spend it, it seems irresponsible, and most of it just left it there. How unbelievable is that he's taken a bow for a plan that's been abused?
Well, look, what I wish the president would do is stand up and say, look, teachers matter. This isn't a criticism of teachers. I can't name you the first 6 presidents of the United States in proper order, but I will never forget my first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and 6th grade teacher. This is not the fault of our teachers. It is the fault, in many cases, of teacher unions, and it's the fault of woke local officials. And I wish the president would say, here's our new rule: no excuses, schools. I don't care how old you are. You're not getting out of the 3rd grade until you can read. You may be 16 years old, by God, but you're going to still be in the 3rd grade learning to read. We're going to find out, I wish the president would say, which of our teachers can teach and pay them. And we're going to find out which of our teachers can't teach and either tell them to teach them how or tell them to find a new line of work. And we're going to use that $200 billion to help our kids catch up, because government made a mistake in shutting down these schools. Right. It was down, bone deep, down to the marrow, stupid, but we're going to fix it. But he doesn't do any of that.
Senator, I think it's so insulting that they're trying to rewrite history. The teachers' unions were actually fighting the private schools who were open and saying they needed to shut them down too. And by the way, 195 million Chinese students were in school while our kids were on Zoom. Anyway, thank you for joining us this morning, and we appreciate your wisdom, both as a politician and a former teacher.
Thank you, sir. I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.